It was the vision of winter in India, desolate yet strangely beautiful, of endless tracts of luminous yellow grey land, of dark-bodied, sad-faced, incredibly thin men and women who move silently, looking almost like silhouettes, and over which an indefinable melancholy reigns. Amrita Sher-Gil was born to a Hungarian mother and Indian father in 1912. Her father was from an aristocratic family, working as a Sanskrit scholar and photographer. Her mother was a Hungarian Jewish singer. An unorthodox and artistic tendency was apparent in the family, which would be absorbed by Amrita Sher-Gil, who became a modernist painter of great importance. Having lived in both India and Hungary as a child, Sher-Gil came to encounter what Homi K Bhaba's theory of hybridity outlines. In this video, we will be exploring this theory in congruence with her work. At cause of her artistic talents, it was believed she should train as a painter in Paris, the heart of the Western art world at the time. She was 17 when she moved to France to paint, and was in fact the first Indian student at the École des Beaux-Arts. To me, this fact alone proves Sher-Gil's tenacious nature and attestation of her strong will from a young age. Experiencing the world through a physicality which read as quote-unquote exotic, despite being culturally and nationally half Hungarian, Sher-Gil's paintings flourished into what can be seen as a hybrid body of work, reflective of her Eastern and Western identities. Indian critical theorist Homi K Bhaba's theory of hybridity describes the novel transcultural forms that take place at the moment of contact between subject and colonization. We can go directly to Bhaba's writing. In his The Locations of Culture, he says, "It is that third space, though unrepresentable in itself, which constitutes the discursive conditions of enunciation that ensure that the meaning and symbols of culture have no primordial unity or fixity, that even the same science can be appropriated, translated, and rehistoricized anew. Hybridity is the sign of the productivity of colonial power, its shifting forces and fixities. It is the name for the strategic reversal of the process of domination through disavowal, that is, the production of discriminatory identities that secure the pure and original identity of authority. Hybridity is the re-evaluation of the assumption of colonial identity through the repetition of discriminatory identity effects. It displays the necessary deformation and displacement of all sites of discrimination and domination. It unsettles the mimetic or narcissistic demands of colonial power, but re-implicates its identifications in strategies of subversion that turn the gaze of the indiscriminated back upon the eye of power. Sher-Gil held an exceptional place in both French and Indian society at the time, belonging to both and simultaneously neither. In her work, we often see Indian subjects in a style heavily influenced by European formalism and post-impressionism. Sher-Gil was gifted an enormous freedom of movement by being able to study abroad due to her dual nationality, as well as thanks to her parents' wealth and class. She humanizes the other in her paintings, having occupied such a status during her time in Europe. Sher-Gil had a great interest in Paul Gauguin. This is, in itself, an interesting fact, as he painted his Tahitian women with a male colonialist gaze. Sher-Gil came from the East to Europe, a reverse trajectory to Gauguin, but similar in experience of the social and geographical perspective shift that came with supplanting themselves into a different culture. In 1934, Sher-Gil returned to India, where she would remain for the rest of her life. Her country during the 30s was experiencing great political upset, as Gandhi and the independence movement were setting in motion India's journey to independence against the colonising forces of England. Scholar G.H.R Tillotson asserts in his paper on Sher-Gil that she was an outsider to India when she returned, exploring the subject more formally than emotionally. Did she see her subjects like Gauguin saw his? We can answer this with one of her paintings. Her self-portrait as Tahitian shows her self-awareness of the problematics of the Western male gaze on women of colour. In the European salons, she reclaims the nude body of colour in this self-portrait. Granted, this is a self-portrait rather than a painting of others, like Gauguin's, but inserting herself into her work under such a title translates a very clear political connotation. Instead of black women being exoticized and sexualized for European male desire, curiosity, and intellectual dissection, Sher-Gil stands confidently, a combination of the mastery of her skills as a painter despite all odds. She takes on a second hybridity here, as author and as subject. Supporting evidence of Sher-Gil's preference for formalism can be seen in writings to art critic Carl Candelavala in 1938. I don't know if it is a passing phase or a durable change in my outlook, but I see in a more detached manner and more ironically than I ever have done. I have tried to give all the figures in these paintings the flat relief of cardboard figures pasted onto a canvas. She also said, I realised my mission then, to interpret the life of Indians, and particularly of the poor Indians, pictorially, to paint the silent images of infinite submission and patience, to depict the angular brown bodies, strangely beautiful in their ugliness, to reproduce on canvas the impression their sad eyes created on me. Though a little difficult to hear in contemporary times, the statement shows a clear inclination to represent the people of her country and their contemporary struggles to her fastly growing and adoring audience in Europe at the time. We can perhaps partially excuse what would today be judged more for the colourist and classist language that Sher-Gil uses, for the subjects in her work represent a kind of triumph for their humanitarian depictions. This is evidenced in the individual nature of the people Sher-Gil painted. Sher-Gil scholars refer to this painting, called the Brahmacaris, as one of her great masterpieces. In 1936, Sher-Gil stayed in South India and became enraptured by the frescoes in the Ajanta caves. From then, her paintings were enlivened with a new style. This is evident in the rhythmic positioning of the figures in the Brahmacaris, all dressed in white trousers in a warm, dim setting. The framing of the image allows nothing but the figures to be profiled in the painting, emphasizing them as the transmitters of the image's resounding stillness. In the Ladies Enclosure was painted in the garden of her family estate. The colour palette is warm and could be said to echo that of the Rajput miniatures. The women in the picture span several ages. They were occupants of Sher-Gil's estate throughout her time there. The image is split into a series of horizontal sections, giving the picture plane depth despite a deliberate disregard of shading on the women's saris in favour of flatness. This facilitates the women in flowers as equal flourishes of colour, but also complements the harmonious intergenerational kinship depicted. Sher-Gil's works are both heavily formalised, rhythmic, artificially coloured, and yet at the core aim to represent the people of India, their lives, their habits, their emotions. Amrita Sher-Gil triumphs at creating a new realisation of European formalism, combined with the representation of political tumult in her country, thus inserting meaning to what was alongside the purer formal styles that she trained amongst. These images, as a result of an east-to-west dialogue within Sher-Gil's work, are the reason Homi K Bhaba's theory of hybridity has been applied in this video. It's not often one comes across a female artist of colour during the modernist period who reached a level in her career of such calibre. Amrita Sher-Gil died at 28 in 1941. According to her niece, Navina Sundaram, who made a wonderful film about her aunt in 2004, the cause of death is still unknown. Though art historian Yashodhara Dalmia later wrote that according to Sher-Gil's own accounts, it was most likely a cause of a failed abortion. In 2013, the centenary year of her birth, the UN's cultural organisation declared this would be the International Year of Amrita Sher-Gil. Her legacy lives on thanks to the volume of work and depth of subject she depicted during her short but saturated life.